Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alice Brown. My current role in the city of Boston is actually working at a small nonprofit called Boston Harbor Now, where I'm the director of water transportation, and I'm working to expand ferry transportation in the region. But today I'm actually going to talk to you a lot more about all the things you've heard today packaged up as what the public has taught me about the future of transportation. Prior to joining Boston Harbor Now, I spent 2.5 years working on this plan, Go Boston 2030. It's one of several plans that Boston has done under the Walsh administration, which is about 4 years old. He's up for re-election next month. But it's a really important plan to me and to the city and to the region because thanks to the Barr Foundation, we had incredible funding that allowed us to do public engagement that was completely unprecedented. And it allowed us to have both digital engagement, so we leveraged all the great technology tools. We reached people who couldn't come to public meetings. We said you can participate in your pajamas or on the T. But we also went out into the field and we talked to people in every single neighborhood in all kinds of weather conditions, including that 2015 storm that was alluded to on the last panel. And we heard some really consistent things. And I think what I'm hoping to share with you today is both what I heard, but a synthesis of what I heard on this stage today. Here are some filters you can think about if you work in transportation, or even if you're just advocating for transportation because you think your commute sucks, or you want people to come access the services that you're so striving to provide. So if you have any kind of solution for the future of transportation, whether it's digital, whether it's analog, whether it's anything in your city, I want you to think about what I've heard both today and most importantly from people all across the city of Boston. Does your transportation innovation improve equity? That word has been tossed around a lot on stage today. I want to be really explicit that in Boston in particular, we have decades of segregation. We have a huge income and more incredibly, a huge wealth gap and disparity between white Bostonians and African-American Bostonians. And we want a transportation system that closes that gap actively, that isn't just better for everyone, it's better for people who've been on the bottom for too long. I also want to emphasize that we want to minimize climate impact. So we've heard that autonomous vehicles should be shared, they should be electric, but you know what's totally free of carbon emissions? Biking and walking. It's also really important that transit move people much more efficiently, and we want to make sure that that's always at the forefront. And finally, we want to make sure that we're expanding choice. I'm a transportation nerd, so I have, and I will tell you all about it, 9 ways to get to work. And I want that kind of choice to be available to all Bostonians. But I know that I'm in a place of privilege. I work downtown, I live in an adjacent neighborhood that also happens to be on the water and is served by buses and by trains, and I have the benefit of Lyft and Uber. And in extreme circumstances, I can cross-country ski to work. But that's not true for everyone. And so when we were out in the field, we were asking people, what's your question about the future of transportation? How do you want to be getting around in the future? And we heard from people about a variety of different things. But one of my favorite programs was something called Share Your Trip with BTD. We took 9 members of the city of Boston, 9 residents, and we paired them with 9 members of the Boston Transportation Department staff. And they were able to share stories about what they wanted the future to look like, how their immediate needs could be met, and how their long-term needs could be met. And we were able to share that with blog posts and photography, but there are some core elements that I want to share with you. Does your transportation innovation support people with disabilities? The Americans with Disabilities Act is going to require you to do certain things. You're going to have tactile warning strips. You're going to make sure that you have buttons and walk signal announcements. It's going to make sure that you have elevators where there might be stairs. But I want to say, whenever you're introducing an innovation, does it help people with mobility challenges? Does it help people with vision challenges? Those are extremely common in older adults, and we want to make sure that people of all ages can get around Boston and elsewhere. I also want to make sure that you're supporting those people walking and biking. Obviously, if it's not an interstate, you could walk or bike most places. But how are you designing your intersections? How are you designing your signals and your signal timing? How is some innovation going to help people just get around the city? Not everyone walks or bikes the whole way to work, but if you're using a train or a bus, or even if you're parking your car down the street, there's some piece of your trip where you are walking. That's for Wendy. I also want to make sure that you're supporting people with kids. There's a key moment in every adult's life, every adult who has kids, where they have to make some really careful choices about where they're living and working. And if you don't provide them with the transportation technologies and opportunities that allow them to travel with their children without a car, they're going to say, I need the car. I need the car to move my kids. I need to move the car to get to all the places I need to get with my kids. And we featured 2 people who have chosen to live without a car and still managed to make it work as parents in Boston. This is really untechnical, but I want to put it out there. We need to support people with lots of stuff. The idea that everything is going to be shared does not reflect what my brother's car looks like. People store a huge amount of stuff in their personal vehicles, and people move a lot of stuff in their personal vehicles. And the only person we followed who needed a car did it because she was running a farmer's market 2 days a week. And so even though she could have taken the bus to work, it was 1 block away, she would have loved to, she needed to move all that stuff around. And we talk about freight at a big scale, but we have to figure out how technology solutions are helping people like her. And then the last thing is that while I don't think that 24-hour transit is coming to Boston anytime really soon from a financial standpoint, I do think that we have to recognize that our transit system is not always what's on the map. In the middle of the day, it looks like the picture on the left, and if I need to get to the airport for a 7 a.m. flight, it looks like the picture on the right. We have to make sure that transportation solutions are not only working at peak times to move people around, but they're moving people around at off-peak, that those same choices are available for more of the day and across all seasons. Go Boston 2030 ultimately came up with goals and targets in 9 categories, 3 of which are shown here: expanding access, improving safety, and ensuring reliability. But the thing that people asked for that was so straightforward that it's not even on here has to do with what they're used to having on their digital devices. And that, to me, is efficiency and information. Efficiency is this sense that, I get everything I want just when I want it, just when I click on my phone. And the number of people who are really well educated, who think a lot about transportation, who would come and talk to me, who said, I just want all the lights to turn green for me. I just want to get there right away. Well, yeah, everyone kind of wants the instantaneous right away. But whether we're shopping for books in a bookstore as opposed to just buying them online, which is what this quote is actually from a podcast about, or whether or not we're just traveling through the city and we know we have to stop at a few lights, or we know that even if we can call the phone on our device, we're going to have to wait for that car to arrive. And the other thing we want is information. There's a lot of information on our phones, but we like it when we see in the real world confirmation that we're in the right place. That's why there are street signs and we like them. But we also like it when we have a place where we can go get bus information or train information. And no matter how permanent or temporary that place is, we want to know that we're in the right place, that we can check in and say, here are my options. There might be someone else waiting and we can confirm with them that we're in the right place. And that's a great opportunity to leverage digital technology, but don't assume that everyone has the information they need in their pocket or knows how to access it. There are 4 technologies I'm going to talk about next. The first of those is trip planning apps. You heard from Waze this morning. Waze is a great partner with the city of Boston, as she mentioned. These are amazing ways that we can create more choice. Whether you're using Google Maps to say, is it faster to walk or bike or take the train, or whether you're using a map app like Transit, which I use to know whether to walk or run to the train. But not everyone knows how to use them. Every day I meet someone who's making a terrible transportation choice because they didn't know that this app was out there, or that the app that they needed was out there. Maybe their friend told them about Waze. But there are some other ways in which these particular apps and others can improve. Are they reaching people who simply don't think to look at them? How do we create a culture where we say, your choice is available on your phone? How do we create a culture where it says multimodal trips are available? None of these apps are going to tell me, if you Hubway right now, you can actually, Hubway is our bike share. You can bike share right now, you can catch this train, and that'll get you where you need to be by this time. They're not integrating different modes. And again, there's the digital divide. How many people are using these phones is different from how many people are using these apps, but there's still a set of people who don't have the phone, who want the paper copy of their information. They want someone to call and interact with to find out what they need. Consolidated fare media also came up in our last panel, as well as an earlier one this morning in Miami. There's this huge promise of saying, you can work across multiple transit agencies. The Clipper card in San Francisco, 27 transit agencies are working together to make that app, make the card work. But the card is still just taking money off of your account. It's not the same thing as saying, once you buy into the transit system, we'll give you unlimited access, or we'll guarantee you free transfers. One great thing about the Connect card in Pittsburgh is that it's now allowing you to access their bike share program for an additional 15 minutes so that you can actually get that last mile connection. And that's really, I think, what bike share is the absolute best thing for. So what I'm hoping for future fare media, whether it's the automated fare collection that was mentioned earlier, some of these cards, is that we find a way to create subsidies. We are so used to having food stamps or housing vouchers. How do we give people credit and say, here, make a transportation choice with this credit? Ideally, these move beyond transit systems. So again, they're integrated with bike share, they're integrated with Lyft and Uber. You really have a range of choices that you can use moving forward. And finally, again, the autonomous vehicle. It'll be great when it's shared and it's electric, but it's still not going to be how everyone gets around. I'm still going to have 8 other ways to get to work, and I'm still going to want to use most of them. If we believe that innovation happens when we cluster businesses, that the best forms of urban design are when we put beautiful buildings around a common public space, you're not going to have that experience if everyone's just hopping into one of these cars and buzzing off into their individual lives. And we have to make sure that autonomous vehicles are only one part of this huge ecosystem of choice. If you're a city or you're any kind of government agency and you're filtering through these different kinds of innovation, you should be considering very carefully, and I'm sure many of you are, so I'm really saying this to people who don't work in government and want to know what government should consider, you should be considering asking 3 things. First of all, how are you sharing data? Waze, fantastic partner, as was described. We would absolutely back that up in our experience in Boston. Zipcar and Enterprise said that they would exchange data and partnerships with on-street spaces for their vehicles, and that's worked really well in Boston. We have no data from Lyft and Uber that is of any use to policy or planning people at all. And so it's really important that if you're going to bring in new technology and you're gathering data about a city, share that data. We can do better things with sharing. The second thing is supporting density. That goes back to what I sort of alluded to with the autonomous vehicles, this question of if we love cities, if we think that what makes cities cool is when they're dense and integrated, we should be making sure that new technology coming in is doing that same kind of work. And finally, all of these new technology disruptions are going to radically change how we finance infrastructure. It's a world without parking meters. It's a world without registered vehicles. It's a world without traffic tickets. It's a world without a lot of ways that we collect fines now, or revenues, or fees, or taxes, and gas taxes. And we need to make sure that we're figuring out how to finance infrastructure in this future world. People should be asking of transportation innovation, what does it mean to be a brand new passenger? Every time I travel and I get on a new transit system, there are places where I'm like, oh, I understand how this works, and places where I am scrambling, unable to speak the language, unaware at all of how to make the system work for me. And no matter where you work, there is a new person every day using your system, and you want to make sure it's designed for them. You should expect that you can change modes daily, that it's not just like, oh, of course you're driving, so you're going to be driving every day. Or now that you're taking the bus, you're going to take the bus every day. You want to make sure that the system is flexible and adapting to you. And finally, you should expect the system to support good choices. If your city believes in equity and climate mitigation and choice, you should feel like that's being incentivized in your city and not another mode. In the future, we're all going to be living in an analog world, and I hope that we can overcome the digital divide to move everyone around more effectively. Thank you.